So I'm really excited because today I have an update on our little tiny home. Hey there, my name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to mi casa. It is a very humid morning here in Tennessee, and it's actually quite bright, even though it's completely overcast. We shouldn't be expecting any rain, but I don't know. We'll see. The weather up here is really unpredictable. And today I have an update. My background is a little different. As you can see, there are lots of updates on the YouTube studio / tiny house. And you know what? I think we're just going to call it the cottage. And first of all, because YouTube studio and tiny house it's just too much, too many syllables. And it's funny because whenever we refer to it here on the farm, like as a family, we call this the cottage. We're going to the cottage. We got to work in the cottage. Daddy's in the cottage. So let's just all agree to call it the cottage. Plus, that's kind of how I want it to feel anyways. So, but you all know exactly what this is. But I think the cottage is just going to stick. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about the ceiling and the walls. In the last update, you saw my husband and my dad put up the really beautiful tongue and groove ceiling. So after Nelson and my dad put the ceiling up, it was time to put the walls in place. For the walls, Nelson and I had, discussed what options we really wanted. And again, keeping with that cottage feel, I thought it would be really nice to have something with paneling. And we had thought about doing sheetrock, but honestly, sheetrock would have been so much more work and expense because Nelson and I could have put the sheetrock up. However, we would have needed a professional to come in and tape it and mud it and sand it to be nice and smooth. Don't get me wrong, Nelson can do a great patch job on a wall. He's done many of them over the last several years, but drywall, it takes talent. It takes, somebody who knows what they're doing. And honestly, the quotes that we got just for the labor part of that, it was a lot. And then having to get the people up here to come and do the work, we were like, this is probably not the best solution. So we were thinking about what kind of options were going to be best for the walls here. And I had remembered the paneling that we had used in our pantry at our last house. And it was that faux shiplap paneling, the 4x8 sheets that you can buy at Home Depot. And I told Nelson, if we use those, we don't have to worry about mudding. We don't have to worry about, taping and sanding. We could just put them up. And then on the seams, we just caulk it. And all you have to do is paint over everything and it'll look, nice and even. And I knew that because we had worked with it before. Now, these panels have gone up significantly in price. They have not come back down. But when we took into account the time it was going to save us and the money it was going to save us on labor for hiring somebody to come up here and do the drywall for us, it actually worked out better. So we headed out to our nearest Home Depot. By the way, Tennessee loves Lowe's. There's a lot more Lowe's up here than there are Home Depots. We actually have to travel about an hour and 15 minutes before we can get to a Home Depot around these parts. But and unfortunately, Lowe's does not carry these panels. So we went to Lowe's. The guys who helped us were very nice. We actually had to get them to unload a brand new pallet of them because they didn't have enough for us. And they were kind enough to put them in our trailer that we borrowed from a neighbor and load them up for us. So I think we ended up with 30 panels. It was a lot of panels. But of course, in true Platero nature, something always has to happen on the way home from bringing that stuff. We get a flat tire on the interstate. You always drive by people who get flats on the interstate and you feel so terrible for them. And this time around, it was us. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah. We had all the kids with us and we had to pull to the side of the road on the interstate. And poor Nelson had to change out a tire on the way home, bringing these panels in. while I helped him with the flashlight because it was getting dark. It was towards the evening. We didn't get up here till it was like nighttime, pitch dark. That put a little delay in our trip back from bringing those panels home. But we made it. The panels made it. It was all good. Nelson unloaded them that evening. He put them in the cottage to make sure that they were, nice and safe because we've had some really crazy storms here. While we were putting up these panels, we had probably one of the wildest storms that anybody has ever experienced up here on our mountain in our entire area for as long as they've known. I mean, we've had people here who've lived all their lives and they haven't seen a storm come this way. It just so happened that it was on the very first day of school. Nelson and I, we were finally, getting started and putting up the panels up on the walls. The kids were at school. We were like, yes, Nelson even took that week off so that we can focus on putting these panels up as quickly as possible. And that very first day, when the kids were in school, we were here working. This storm just comes in out of nowhere. I had my alarms going off. There's like tornado warnings everywhere. Not that there was a tornado up here because we're kind of high up for a tornado, but all of a sudden, this crazy storm just blows through. And we were caught in here because we were working on the panels when it came through. And it was the closest thing to a tornado. As a matter of fact, they believe that one actually touched down about half an hour from here on lower ground. And we lost power that day. We lost power for, I want to say almost 3 days after that. We had to live off a generator for the next 3 days or so while we were trying to put these panels up. This is the week that Nelson took off so we can focus on this, okay? And the schools are calling us like every half hour, it seems like, to just give us an update on how the kids are doing, that they're safe. We were kind of actually happy that they were in the school when it happened because, they're protected. They're all, blocked buildings, big structures. But the kids did end up losing power as well. As a matter of fact, about 90% of the county and like the entire area around here lost power. They had to bring in extra help from other counties. There were people who did not have any power for at least 4 days. We were lucky that we had the generator and Nelson was able to power the camper and power our shed with like the meat freezer that we have in there. We were, wanting to make sure that we did not lose any of our food that we had been storing in that freezer, especially, what remained of the half a cow that we had bought earlier on this year. So we were able to do that. Thank goodness that we had that generator. And then with any remaining power that the poor little generator had, Nelson and I worked inside cutting and just trying to install paneling as best we could. Now, the following day, the kids actually did not have school because the schools didn't have any power. So they were kind of, at home with us. So things got a little complicated that week. But the county was great. I mean, they were really working 24 hours a day. We saw them out all over the, roads, fixing power lines, cutting back trees. I mean, there was significant damage on a lot of properties, lots of trees down. Again, we had never seen anything like it. Even our neighbor and the gentleman who we bought our cow from, or a half a cow from, he's kind of like more so the father figure of this entire road because he's lived here all of his life and he goes out and he checks on everybody, make sure everybody's okay when things like this happen. And he said he had never seen anything like it. So it was pretty rough. We had several trees down on our road, and the reason we lost power was because a transformer blew out just up the road from, where we're at. So it was a very eventful week. I'm glad we made it through, and I'm glad, there hasn't been much storms like that since then. And that's something else. I'm glad we were in here because storms hit a little differently when you're in a camper. You don't feel as safe. I'll give you that. You really don't. But we made it through that week. We kept working on the paneling, even though everything was just a little bit slower. It wasn't as fast as we wanted it to be. So then, of course, we started with kind of like the harder sections of the cottage to do the paneling. We knew we needed to start in the kitchen area because that had the most angles and work our way down. And also, the kitchen has higher ceilings in one area where the stove is going to be. So we had to kind of do the paneling a little bit different. We had to slide them up. That way, there was no seams up on the wall. But the good thing is that we have counters and a stove that are going to go there. So any kind of seams that we would have, at least on that wall, would be hidden by the cabinets. So we started there and started working our way down the rest of the cottage. The one good thing about these panels is that, you cut them to fit, you put them up, and you're done. The bad thing is that they create such a mess. Whatever they're made out of, like this cardboard mixture, I don't even know what it's made out of, but this composite material, it's worse than like wood shavings. And so since we were inside, because there were storms, because there was just unpredictable weather, we couldn't have any of these get wet. So we had to work inside the cottage, and it was just creating a hot mess. But we made it through. Everything worked out, and I think the walls look really good this way. It has a charm. It has a really nice charm with the vertical slats along the wall. And the great thing is that since our walls are, shorter than 8 foot, the 4x8 panels were perfect. Just putting them side by side as we went along, just cutting some off the top. The next thing we needed to do after we had all the wall panels up was to kind of wipe everything and make sure all of the like vertical seams were nice and clean so that I can come back in and caulk all of the seams between the panels. That way you didn't see where one's, ended and the other one began. And then I also needed to putty all of the nail holes that we had created when installing the panels. Now, the good thing is that I actually found out that they had white wood putty, which is awesome because then when I go over and paint, I don't have to worry about these little dark spots everywhere on the walls. So that's awesome. I also like using wood filler for the nail holes. I think it just goes a lot easier. It's less messy than a caulk. Of course, the seams between the panels needed the caulking just because in case there was any movement, that's actually a lot easier because, you can fill it in and it won't crack over time. So basically, I would wipe the panels, then Nelson would go in with the caulk gun, and then I would go in and smooth it all out after him. And that's pretty seamless. that's kind of how we usually, do our caulking on any projects that we do. He goes in with a gun, I go in after with my finger to smooth it out. So we had that one down packed. Of course, after the panels on the walls were done, at least up to where they needed to be, we were trying to get the main areas because there's still a couple of, walls that we don't have covered up. But in time, they'll get done. Um, Now, the next challenge was trying to make the seam between the ceiling and the wall panel seamless. The seam seamless, yeah. We had to make sure we covered the gaps because it's not all perfect. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have to spend any extra money. We didn't have to go out anywhere else and, do any more errands. So Nelson thought that, we can make our own like little piece of trim to put between the ceiling and the wall panel to kind of close any gaps that we might have remaining. And we had some tongue and groove still left over. There were some that had some imperfections. We couldn't use them, some shorter boards. So Nelson decided to cut them down and make trim pieces out of them. We got the right size. We put them up against the wall and we figured, hey, this actually looks pretty good. And, we can stain them the same color as the ceiling and it'll just look like it's this nice seamless transition from ceiling to wall. And that's what we did. He ripped a couple of the tongue and groove panels down, made these little trim pieces. So we ended up saving some money, not having to go out on another trip to get anything new. And that's what we used to put up on that seam. And I think it actually ended up working out very well. I think it looks really nice that way. Of course, I asked you guys what I should do because I wasn't really loving the yellow tones in that. And I think the majority of you guys really wanted me to whitewash it. And that's what we ended up doing. We ended up whitewashing the ceiling. And I'm not going to lie, 10 out of 10, I do not recommend whitewashing a ceiling when you're 8 months pregnant. That was not fun. You're staining upside down, basically, right? Looking up, and it's a neck, shoulder, arm, back workout. But, wood doesn't stain evenly. Even if you use a conditioner, it just doesn't. It's the nature of wood. And I'm kind of like a perfectionist. And so, I see the fact that not everything is evenly coated, but all in all, I do like how it feels. You guys were right. It definitely does lighten up the space, which I want to keep this light and airy just because it is a small little building and I want it to feel as large as possible. Yet I really wanted to keep the wood grain on the ceiling. This tongue and groove is something that I've never had before in a ceiling and I do like the charm. I like the fact that it feels cottagey. It feels very nice and warm. I didn't want to lose the wood grain. And, the whitewash gave me that. It gave me the best of, keeping it light and bright, but also enjoying the fact that it is wood, that it's real tongue and groove. And the ceiling is just beautiful. My husband and my dad did a great job in installing that. They've never done that before. And we're really happy with how it turned out. The ceiling took about 2.5 days to complete just because obviously um, it was a ton of work. I think I ended up using like 4 quarts of this stuff. It was not fun. I am so glad that that is behind me. I do really like how it turned out. I was very skeptical just because I'm a perfectionist and wood doesn't take very easily, or, wood just doesn't take very evenly. And as I was kind of like halfway through, I was kind of feeling like, man, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should have just left it alone, save the hassle and, the fact that I'm over here thinking it looks like crap, because I did have several of those moments. But now that it's all done, now that it's completed and I see both the walls and the ceiling together, it really does look really pretty. And even though there are some little imperfections here and there, it's not my best paint job. I do really appreciate the way it looks. I like that the wood grain is showing still, which is the biggest thing for me because I really think it's pretty. And I'm just glad it's done. I'm glad it's done so we can move on to other things like installing the cabinets and the floors, because that was the biggest thing. We could not put the floors down until we had the ceiling done, because we didn't want to get paint everywhere, which you kind of do when you're painting a ceiling, no matter how well you paint. So that is what I have for you guys today. As far as updating you on the tiny home, there has been more work done, obviously, since then, and an unexpected update that we decided to just go ahead and hire somebody out to do, and we'll let you guys know that in the next update video. So much more to come. I hope you guys like how the walls and the ceiling turned out. I'm excited. Now everything can just go a lot faster, hopefully, especially since we are doing the online baby shower. You guys have been amazing. We have been blessed with so many packages in the post office. It's been a little crazy, but we're looking forward to setting that up. And in the community tab, if I haven't done it already, there will be a poll that you guys can kind of vote on the best date and time that kind of works for the majority of us, so we can all just show up and have a good time. So yeah, that's what's kind of going on. I have to head out because I've got errands to run now. I hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, adios.